everybody, welcome back for yet another episode of Entertainment Evolved. This is going to be an Evolved review here today. We are talking about The Last of Us episode 3 that just aired last night as of the time we're recording this. But before I go any further, let me welcome back my guest, Stanos returns. Stan, welcome back to the show, man.
What's going on, people? How y'all doing today, man? It's good to be back, man.
Yeah, man, it's been a minute. I think last time I had you on was we were talking about some House of the Dragon, and today we're going to be talking about something that I know is near and dear to you, and that's The Last of Us.
Absolutely, man. I am ready to get into it. Super excited.
Absolutely, me too. I don't think anybody could have predicted the way that that episode was going to go last night.
So, if you want to jump right into it, man, when the episode started and they were walking down the road, I seen it going one a completely different way than and I don't want to get into spoilers and stuff yet, but uh the way that they transitioned into basically Joel talking about like a memory. I thought they were gonna show more of that, but then when it went into this story, I was like, okay, cool. They showing a little bit. I didn't realize it was gonna be majority of the episode, but once it was, man, the writing on. I thought I was watching a movie. I didn't realize I was still watching the show at that point.
I'm right there with you, and I'm glad you mentioned spoilers. So for everybody listening, the first part of this, the majority of this episode, we're only going to talk about spoilers from the first 3 episodes of the TV show. So anything in the games that goes beyond that. So we might talk about like differences between the show and the game, but anything in the game that's like beyond episode 3, we won't be talking about that until the end, and we'll give you plenty of warning before we kind of speculate on what might come next. Um, I don't know how much good it's going to do to for us to speculate on that because on the last episode we talked about what episode 3 might be about and we were way off. So, before we get into it though, man, what's your relationship with The Last of Us? Did you play the games as they came out? Like, what do you think about the games?
So I got on the first game kind of late to the party. I actually didn't play The Last of Us until the remastered version came out on PS4.
Right?
And everybody was talking about it. I think I had went to like an E3 conference when they were showing them in like in the movie theaters, and I seen it, and I was like, man, this looks really good. So I ended up getting the game, and man, the first game I was absolutely blown away. And I'll say this: I am not the horror game guy. I'm I, the word that I want to use. I'll just put it this way: I am very scared when it comes to scary video games. Movies, I can watch them all day, but video games, Resident Evil, I can't do it. I just absolutely can't do it. It's just too much for me. I'll end up putting the controller down and then I'm done. Like so I say all that to say this game was good enough that it makes you almost forget that it's a horror game. And some people don't even look at it as a horror game, but I would say that it does qualify as one in my opinion. And as you play the game and even watching the show, you can kind of see why.
Yeah, I would absolutely put it in the horror genre. I don't know if I necessarily would put it in like the survival horror genre with like Resident Evil and stuff like that. But I definitely think it's a horror game. I mean, there's a massive plague that is honestly more terrifying than any of the other like Walking Dead, Resident Evil, any of that stuff. Most of those like plagues where you have like zombies and whatnot are, those are like made up, right? That's science fiction. But this, I mean, while it is still science fiction, the entire concept of like the cordyceps like evolving to where they can live inside of human beings, like out of all of those things, this is the one that's the most rooted in science and the one that is the most likely to happen.
I agree. And then just to kind of piggyback off of that, going back to the show, the start of episode 2 did really well with kind of playing into that when they brought the doctor in and had her explaining what was going on, and it just kind of brought the realization of what situation that they were in to the masses, to everybody watching it.
Yeah, I really loved that scene. As a matter of fact, it was probably my favorite part of episode 2.
Hmm.
The fact that they opened episode 2 with that scene, like I think it almost kind of hurt the rest of the episode because I wanted more of that. Like I could have done a whole episode of like that day zero, like at the out, when the outbreak hit, kind of thing.
Well, the thing I loved about it the most is how it actually sets the tone from this for the show and sets it apart from the game. Because what I didn't want going into the show for this to be a line by line, scene by scene rendition of the game. I was like, well, you can just watch the cutscenes on YouTube if that's the case. But
Right.
the fact that they're kind of slightly altering the story and they're kind of like you said making almost bringing it to where people could see the possibility of this actually happening in real life. It makes it a little bit more real and ultimately makes it a little bit more scary. So I appreciated that scene so much because now I'm even though I played through the games, I'm looking at the show through a completely different lens.
Right. And I kind of have a unique perspective on this because I'm not someone who's a huge fan of the games. Like I think so to me, like the first original game, like I love the story in it, but I don't like the gameplay. And
That's
then
fair.
the second game is the opposite for me. Like I hated the story, but I love the gameplay in the second one. So it's like, when I started watching the show, I was like, I feel like honestly this story was better as a TV show from jump.
That's fair. That's fair. You first person I heard say that, but I mean, shoot, 3 episodes in, I think I have to agree, man.
Yeah, I think this was like the right medium for it, but once again, if it didn't have all the popularity from being, such a loved video game, then, they probably would not have had the budget to get the cast that they got for this thing.
That
Uh,
is
you
fair.
know, because honestly, as somebody who wasn't a huge fan of the games, the thing that had me so excited about this show was the casting.
Yes, yeah, yeah, and I know, you know, I've heard mixed reviews about Ellie's character, but I enjoy it. I mean, and then plus, I mean, we watched Game of Thrones, so we enjoyed her anyway. But
Right.
some people they weren't really feeling the casting for it at first. I think as the episodes go on, we kind of starting to, or people are starting to warm up a little bit more to her. But Joel's character, Jesus, I mean, come on, man.
Yeah, Pedro Pascal is just killing it, man. There's nothing this man can't do when it comes to acting. Uh, so getting into episode 3 a little bit, it seems like online the the more that the further they go into the show, the more they're making little changes from the game. And I would say that in this episode, they make the first big change from the game. Um, in my opinion, all the changes I've seen really have been positive. I have seen some folks that were pretty upset about this episode.
Oh
Um,
yes.
you know, a- and let me just go ahead and say, like, I don't think that anybody who didn't like this episode is like homophobic, right? Because there is some of that out there for
Right.
sure. There are people that don't like it because of that aspect and like you know whatever, right? Uh,
Hmm.
but I think that what I have seen online is like some people have tried to make it like, oh, if you didn't love this episode, then that's why. It's like that doesn't necessarily have to be why. Some people are really into their, fandoms and things like that, and some people do want a line by line adaptation of something, and I think that those people are going to get their hearts crushed a lot. I mean, look at like the Marvel fans, for instance. Like
Exactly. It's exactly the same thing. I was thinking that.
yeah, I mean, there's not a single comic book where we've got a line by line adaptation, but so much of the MCU is really good. Not to say it doesn't have its faults as well,
Right.
you know. So
Yeah.
what?
I was saying the same thing.
Yeah,
I would so there's two different things that I was seeing. One was them kind of talking about the scenes and that's a big topic nowadays when it comes to shows and movies about them quote unquote trying to push an agenda. And you got some people that just really don't like that. They feel like it's being forced on them. The thing I don't like about that criticism about this show in particular is because that was in the game as well. So I
right.
don't know why it's such a big deal now. I don't know if it's because they're seeing it in live action, but I mean, it was in both games, so it's not. I didn't look at it. It didn't take away from the characters for me. And I mean, the actors in the actual episode, geez, they killed it, man. Like I said, I felt like it was their own movie. And
Right.
then the other part is how much that story deviated from the game. So I was seeing a mixture of both of those.
Yeah, and so looking at this episode, like what's kind of your, I guess, overall thoughts on it? Just as a whole, like, do you think it did a good job with like expanding the world of The Last of Us?
Yes, I think it did a fantastic job of expanding the world. I also think that as we're seeing, if they're kind of going on this trajectory, I know they said that they weren't going to have as big of deviations as this episode, but if they're able to go like do this more throughout the show and ultimately into the next season, or multiple seasons, however they plan on doing that, it's gonna make the show its own entity, even though it is a quote unquote video game show, but it I have relatives that don't play video games at all that are absolutely enjoying the show as if they were watching like Game of Thrones or something. And so the way that they did the storytelling and setting up this, they set up the scene. It's perfect for TV.
Right. And I as well know people that don't play video games at all that are really into this, or people who either weren't into Last of Us really as a game like myself, or people who never played the games at all, or maybe they don't even like that type of game. They're just not interested in like the sort of story-driven games.
Hmm.
And I don't know anyone who's not liking the show. Like I said, we saw some kind of, you see online, there's some people that aren't loving this third episode, but I think they're definitely, in the minority on that. Like, just,
Absolutely.
just very vocal, because if you look at like the reviews, Rotten Tomatoes, Metacritic, any of your, major like websites out there that do reviews and things, this one, I mean, is getting nines and tens kind of across the board, and I think it honestly deserves it.
It absolutely does. And to be honest, I've seen because I watch a fair amount of like what are they called, like reaction YouTubers, where they
Right.
react to game trailers and movie trailers and actual episodes. And a lot of the ones that I followed, they were kind of aligned with what the critics were saying, as well as it being such a good episode, and how many emotions and stuff it was bringing out of them. But like you said, you got your few people here and there that were making a really big deal out of it. And I was like, all right, that's kind of unfair, but everybody's entitled to their own opinion, so I'm not gonna knock them.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this episode was pretty long too. I think it was maybe an hour 20, something like that. And it takes us on this roller coaster, man, because the way the episode starts out, we've got that we've just had the death of Tess.
Mm,
You can tell that Joel is it's really bothering him. Ellie's trying to sort of get through to him. She knows he's just been through this enormous loss. And then we immediately, they go to this gas station. Ellie starts kind of exploring. You don't really know where the episode's going to go. They start walking down the road, and he starts talking about the Fedra, police force there, just kind of executing people
hmm.
because you can't get infected if you're already dead. And you know, I'm like, where is this going? And then they start to show the flashbacks of the town that they were near. And next thing you know, man, it's like this is not an extended, this is not just a little flashback sequence. This is going to be the majority of the episode.
That's what threw me off as well. In my brain, I'm like, okay, I'm trying to see where they're going with this until they started introducing the characters, and I was like, oh, okay, they're really changing this then. Real quick before we continue on this road, though, going back to the gas station scene. Now, this is something I do want to tie back to the video game.
Right?
There were, I would say, three major things that really made me happy from being somebody who enjoys the games to watching it on TV. One, the design of the actual gas station or the shop. the way that they had it set up in the show is almost identical to how they have it set up in the game. Um, they played on to the showing the old arcade, we're in the apocalypse, but this is from a time before all of this was going on. And in this one, in the episode, they showed Mortal Kombat 2. And of course, me being a diehard Mortal Kombat fan, I was blown away by that. The way she was explaining how Melina's fatality, I was like, you guys, man, y'all playing on the hearts of the gamers. I love this. This is beautiful.
I was going
Um,
wild for that also, for that whole scene. I was just like, this is incredible.
Oh man, it's so amazing, and because that wasn't the same game. The setup was the same. The way that they did like the dialogue and how she was kind of excited about seeing it, with it being a broken machine, it was the same as the game, but it was a completely different game. I don't even remember which one it was in the game, but yeah, seeing it being Mortal Kombat, oh man, that was incredible. And then the third thing is it's kind of so the setup in the game on how you like you have some games where you just swap out weapons and stuff. You just press like Y or something like that, right? But in this, it shows them like going through the book bag and grabbing what they need or swapping whatever out of it or crafting and seeing them do it in the show, you're not thinking of it from a game standpoint. You're just like, oh, he's going through his inventory, he's taking out, whatever. But I'm like, oh, I was like, I'm looking at it, I'm like, this is almost like a side by side of the video game of how they do it. So those three things just blew me away. But yeah, we can get back to the flashback now.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I'm glad you mentioned that about the gas station because, like, I definitely didn't want to gloss over, especially the whole Mortal Kombat 2 thing, and like the game machine being there because obviously, like the executive producer on the show is also the director for the game, so this is his baby. And he has an
Mm-hmm.
incredible love for the video game, and so I love that they're throwing all these little sort of Easter eggs in there, and they are so like careful with the outfits because they change their outfits in this episode too,
Mm-hmm.
to be a lot more like what they're wearing in the game at this point in time, and I thought it was incredible.
They nail it. They nailed the outfits, man. It's insane. That they nailed the outfits. They nailed the buildings. I mean, almost, man. It's like you would think that they made the show first and then made the game from that. It's insane how they're able to do this.
Yeah, they definitely HBO is definitely tossing them some money, and they did recently say that they're going to do a second season. So at the end, would definitely want to loop back to that and kind
Mhm.
of imagine a little bit about what that might be like. Um, that being said, we start this flashback. We get introduced to Bill, and
Mhm.
we don't know that his name is Bill for a while, unless you played the game, of course.
Mhm.
And I loved the intro here. He says something about like, not today, you New World Order assholes, or something like that, which I just thought was great. And you get this character, and you immediately think that you know everything about him, right? Because he's that, everybody knows the stereotype. He's this kind of, probably far right guy that, has got a bunker somewhere, and, he's like preparing for the apocalypse or whatever.
Yeah,
And, it's like, oh, he's been waiting on this day.
absolutely.
And I was concerned, or not, maybe not concerned, but I was definitely curious because I don't think I've ever seen Nick Offerman play a really serious character like this.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
so I was like, okay, well, how's that going to be? That's just going to be weird. And for the first couple moments, it kind of was, but then
Mhm.
he was so absorbed into this character of Bill. I mean, honestly, I believe if this man does not win an Emmy, like then like let's just throw the whole damn show out because like this his performance here was stellar.
From start to finish, from start to finish, man.
Yeah, I don't want to take anything away from his co-star either, Murray Bartlett, who played Frank.
Hmm.
The way that they got introduced to each other and kind of like how their relationship evolved and everything. I thought that this was tremendous. I mean, a lot of people are saying, oh, this went on for too long or whatever, but I could have watched a whole hour and a half. Like you said, it could have been its own movie.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like his own movie, and I think a lot of the people who are saying that, it's because one, I mean, how much they delved into the story because they didn't do that in the game. But I think that also left them room for to be able to do this. Like, hey, let's take some of these smaller stories from the game and we can make them into bigger things that still play into the overall theme of the show and the story, but we can kind of really give you a little bit more humanity to some of these characters.
Right. And that theme that you were talking about there, like the way that the relationship between Ellie and Joel is evolving and will evolve. Like
Hmm.
the reason that the Bill and Frank flashback is so important to all of that is that ongoing theme of like Bill was fine before Frank arrived, right? Like he was probably surviving better than anyone on Earth, right?
Absolutely.
This man was living like it was still 2003. He had, he had a gas stove, he had electricity. I mean, plumbing working. I mean, he had everything. He had his own little city there that he had roped off.
Man, he had wine, he had
Yeah,
wine in abundance. He was making restaurant quality meals. Yeah, no, he was living.
yeah. Well, actually, that's the thing. I think the episode kind of shows us there is like what he was doing then was surviving.
Yes,
And he wasn't really living until Frank comes into the picture.
exactly.
And I think that like just the way that you see him change after Frank, comes into the in when he I guess falls into one of his traps or whatever, one of his sinkholes or whatever he's built. And Bill finds him out there and lets him come inside and feeds him and everything. The way their relationship just kind of evolves from there, and you see the changes in Bill. I just thought that it was masterfully done.
I think it was beautiful because starting with his story in the show up into the point where they're in the living room and you can kind of you see this guy who's, I don't want to say jaded, but the world has hardened him even prior to the apocalypse. And so when Frank is in there and he's kind of, just being, friendly and being like a normal human being, right? Which he's not used to being around.
Right.
It at first he's very guarded to it. I mean, he got the gun, he got the gun pointed. He's like, hey, I don't trust you. I don't trust anyone. Even if you seem like you're cool, you could very much turn at any second. And he's just slow, as they're having dialogue and playing the piano. Frank can look through and see the pain in his eyes and see this guy really is a nice guy. And there was a point where there was some joy in him, but something has gone on, even like I said, before the apocalypse, that has hardened him so much that he's kind of turned himself off from the world and other people, and he just slowly just starts chipping away at that armor, and it makes the audience look at him differently because he just seems like this tough guy that's ready for anything. He's prepared for the worst. I mean, he's hoping for the best, prepared for the worst, and he is very well prepared for the worst. But now, like, to your point of surviving, he can get into, well, life can still be enjoyable for me as well.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Frank was his, kind of became his reason for being there. Um, because he could have kept on surviving there. I mean, honestly, like if you're looking at it from a standpoint of the apocalypse that they're in, being in Bill's little town there is pretty much the best place you could be. And Frank opened, Bill's eyes to a lot of things, not just the romance between the two of them, but also, them befriending, Joel and Tess, and like having, like a community or a group of friends, and kind of all those things that that you would have lost in this sort of scenario.
Exactly. Nah, and it made me happy to see because, like I said, I mean, he seems like a good guy, you know. And as the episode goes on, you really get to see this guy does care about people. He cares, you know, he cares a lot. He just been through so much that it's made him this way. And in that world, you kind of have to be that way to survive, to be honest. But you know, and even you know, you can still see him trying to adjust, you know, like when Joel and Tess first come over for their little outside meal and stuff.
I love
You know,
that
he's
scene.
he still got the gun up. He's like, hey man, you know, I'm gonna try this, you know, for Frank, but you know, I'm still who I am, so I gotta keep my guard up.
Yeah, Joel was just like, you can put that gun away, man. Like, and I loved the note too when she reads it, and he's like, this has to be Joel because anybody else would have got fried by my traps, and then the he, and that was just so spot on, and like it made me bust out laughing at, it really like set this, it took us out of that like severity of the tone because that was like right after we learned that they had both, that they were both going to pass that day.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah,
and I mean, truthfully, while I thought this episode was ridiculously like sad, um, you know, to to go out the way that they went out, is kind of how like everybody wants to go. You know what I mean? So you're near people who care about you or love you, and they just kind of both slipped off. Um, I don't know what was in those pills, but they probably hallucinated a bunch and then just drifted off.
there were some, and this is just speaks to the excellent writing strategies that they used. Um, Going to the pills part. So you see him cry. You know, you kind of watching. I'm like, there's something at play here. He's not just going to give him these pills and then that's just the end of it, right?
Exactly.
And I'm like, is he going to just rush and pour some in his and then pour some in his? But then you see him pour the whole bag. I'm like, okay. And Frank is kind of looking like that too. Is like, man, something's up. Like you're a little bit too calm about this. And then when he pours it, he's like, why are there pills already in the bottle? And I was like, yep, I know where this. I was like, I love where this is going, but yeah, not it makes sense. He's like, man, come on, man. Like you are literally my purpose. If you're not here, why do I need to be here?
Right.
You saved my life. And going back to that, when he saves his life, when they show the scene of him healing him, I wasn't sure how this was gonna go because I was like, man, at this point they've deviated so much, I don't know which way they're gonna go with it. And
Yeah,
then they
I
showed
thought they might kill Bill right there with
that's what I thought
when
was
the
gonna happen.
Raiders came in. Yeah.
And then so you see Frank in the wheelchair, and I'm thinking, okay, Bill has died, Frank has gotten older, and now he's kind of off by himself. And then you realize, no, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. When I seen the wheelchair, initially I thought Bill was in the wheelchair from getting shot.
Right. Same.
But then I realized, and then you come to realize it's actually not him. And I'm like, dang, so more time has passed, and he did make it through it. So thankful for that. But what's going on that why Frank is in a wheelchair now? And it kind of as they're speeding up the show and going through years, it just shows that they've survived all this time and they've kind of built out a life for themselves, but they are getting older. They were already kind of, middle aged when they first met. So they're getting older at this point. And unfortunately, when you look at things like the apocalypse and when you see shows like that or movies, you kind of forget that there are still real things that happen to people. Even if you want to take it into our real life with the pandemic, everything that was going on, you still forgot that there were other elements that were out there. Everybody's talking about people getting C-19, but you know, there were still people getting the flu. There were still, just other elements that were causing people to be hospitalized. And in your brain, you kind of almost forget that these things exist, like real life still exists, even though this new thing is kind of what everybody's talking about and everybody's afraid of.
Right. And that is something that definitely has, it's got that correlation to our actual world where all of the pandemic that we had here, it's just like you said, all those different things still went on. People still needed treatments for all those different things. And, as Frank tells him in the episode, they don't specifically say what he had, but I'm going to
Mhm.
guess that it was something like MS, or maybe even Parkinson's or something like that. But MS is probably my guess.
Mhm.
But he says, like, what is, are we going to run into like a door to door MRI salesman? And then he says, there wasn't a cure for this before, the outbreak.
Exactly. Exactly. You're exactly right, man. And they played onto that well, man. I really enjoyed that because, like I said, it takes you out of the apocalypse for a minute and just makes you think, these are real people going through real life things. Even, it whether they're in the apocalypse or now or not, this could have happened either way, and just the fact that it happened in the apocalypse, I mean, it just makes it a little bit more dire. But yeah, yeah, man. The realization of that happening. I mean, clearly the man can't walk anymore. He's in a wheelchair. You're like, oh man. We was really enjoying these people as a couple, and now you're seeing that this is about to end. And you're kind of mentally preparing yourself for it. You're seeing as the scenes go on. At some point he's gonna die, or he's gonna, they wake up and look over and Frank's dead, whatever the case. But then we get to the point where Frank takes matters into his own hands. Like, I don't want to go like that. I want to choose my terms. I want to, us get married. Us just do a bunch of things that if this is my last day on this earth, I want to do everything that brings me joy or would make me happy before I go.
Right. And I think too that with Bill, like, he initially is just absolutely beside himself, as any of us would be. But I
Right,
think that eventually, Bill, I think he quickly realizes, like, either way, this is going to be my last day living here too.
right.
Uh, I think he very quickly makes that decision that, hey, if it's going to be your last day, then it's going to be mine too. Like, he even says, later on, he says, I have lived a full life.
Yeah,
And I like, especially compared to anybody else that's around at this point in time, most of them are living either in federal quarantine zones, and we've seen what that is like,
man.
or you're living outside of a quarantine zone, and we've seen what that is like. So,
Yeah.
you
Nah,
know,
you're
it,
right.
yeah, I mean, they really had it as good as you can have it. And I think they both realized that, and it was touching, man. It was really touching.
And I think it made it better for overall, it made it better for Bill making that decision, even though he didn't tell him what the decision was going to be, because this could go one or two ways. And this is me just putting myself in Bill's shoes. If I know that Frank is going to die, or, I don't want to say kill himself, but, this is his last day.
Right.
And we're doing all of these things that's supposed to bring you joy, but I know this is your last day and I have to go live on life without you. It's going to be hard for me to enjoy those things. It's going to be hard. We're going to go through this wedding, and this wedding ceremony that, me, like, we're having together, but in my mind I'm going, that's the only thing I'm going to be thinking about. But once you make that decision that this is going to be both of your last days, now in your mind you're like, we want to make this day the best day possible, and now you can actually enjoy those things. So even though they didn't show all of those scenes in depth, it kind of gave you peace, thinking that these people really really got to enjoy each other their last day on this earth.
Absolutely. I agree 100%, man. That just it was incredible, and like so many people, like they have it better than so many people out here right now,
Yes.
cuz we don't know, none of us know how we're going to go out, a meteor could land on my house right now while recording this.
All
Like,
right.
anything could happen. Uh I would appreciate that not happening. But like, so for these two to have the life they've had together, to be able, and I love too that they showed, uh, you know, not just the two of them having those great times together, but also that they had bad times as well.
Yeah.
where they weren't getting along, especially like, can you imagine being cooped up with the same person for 20 years? I mean, whether you love them or not, I mean, you're gonna have issues, in that scenario where like this is the only other human contact that you have, really.
Yeah, and I mean that's like a almost an exaggerated feeling of what people were going through when the pandemic first happened and everybody were confined to their homes. You know, you were hearing all the stories about how rough that was on couples, married couples, people home with their kids, um, even single people. How rough it is and how quickly you can feel lonely in this world where everybody's connected, even through technology, except in their case they don't even have the access to the technology, so it's really just them. So having somebody with you, it does make it a little bit easier, but the fact that you two are the only two people that you're around for the majority of the time, obviously you have visitors here and there, or raiders. um
Yes.
yeah, I mean, you're going to fight. It's just, I mean, we're just humans. Like we're going to there's, and then not to mention they're two totally different types of people. So, they're not going to agree on everything. And Bill, he's kind of stubborn a little bit. So,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah, for sure. And I will say this, man, any of those raiders that ever tried to attack that compound, you almost feel bad for them.
yeah, man. The way he had that thing set up, jeez, man. Because at first, the scene, I was like. And I was like, are they going to get in? I was like, this is, they making a strong fight for it, but nah, man, he had that thing locked down. And then not to mention he's going out. So on top of that, they shooting at him and he's just standing there, just taking it and still going. I'm like, he lets off another shot as he's already been shot. And I'm like, with the rifle, that's incredible. I mean, it's hard enough shooting a rifle as it is. Shooting one and you got shot in the stomach. That's kind of crazy. But it just goes to show his character. He's like, I'm standing on what I have. I'm protecting it to my last breath. I'm protecting Frank to my last breath.
Right? Yeah, yeah, absolutely couldn't agree more. And it was something to see that, man, and I they weren't getting in there.
No, no, not at
I
all,
mean,
man.
like Macaulay Culkin ain't got shit on Bill. You know what I mean? Like I'd rather break into his house and get home alone than try to get into Bill's compound.
Yeah, you step on tripwire and get a shotgun straight to point blank range. Like, nah, I'm good, man.
Yeah, yeah, I'm out. Uh,
Even something as mild as falling in that hole. I mean, you're not really getting out of that hole, so that's bad too. It's just not as painful, but I mean, he could just leave you there, and you're just kind of, unless you find a way to climb out of it, you kind of screwed over. And
you,
not to mention,
you just
you're
gonna
in a
starve to
hole.
death. Yeah,
Right, and then you got freaking clickers in them walking around, so they could jump in the hole, and you know what I mean. So it's his setups, his traps were amazing.
yeah, truly. Yeah, I mean, not just for the infected, but for any of those raiders or whatever. It didn't matter what you were. If you came in there without those codes, you were done.
Yeah, and I do appreciate that dialogue between Joel and him, where Joel's like, hey, I know that everything seems cool. This is going to happen. Raiders are going to come. They're going to find the spot, and they're going to try to get in. And he's like, I'm ready for it.
Yeah, he was like, "Oh, well, I hope they do, because
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
bored."
I'm ready, and he was ready. He absolutely was ready.
So when the flashback ends, as they were having that like last dinner together, and they were drinking the wine with the drugs and everything in it, I was sitting there thinking, I was like, what if Joel and Ellie show up right now, like right after they both drink it? And I was like, that would be crazy. I was like, or they'll show up like the next day or something, and we don't really know how long it's been. If it told us in the timeline, I missed it, but it didn't seem like it had been very long.
It did, yeah. So they didn't tell us, and it didn't seem like it was very long. It didn't also seem like it was the next day. It could have been maybe a few weeks gone by or something like that.
And um, we do know that end of the first episode when they escaped the QZ, the quarantine zone.
Hmm.
We know that the 80s music started playing on the radio, and we know that um, Frank had it, or Bill, one of the two, had it set up to play 80s music automatically if they did not come in there every day. So, like if something happened to them.
Hmm.
So, I would assume that the day before Joel and Tess and Ellie leave the QZ is probably the night that they drank the wine because the radio came on the next day.
Man, you just blew my mind with that. That's one thing I missed. I missed that.
Hey, well, that's why we have two people on to cover these. So the
that's
the hope
that's really good.
the hope is that we'll both get it. Hey, I missed entirely in the first episode how the main characters, how like Sarah and Tommy and Joel, like none of them were eating the flour. I missed that entirely until like I saw somebody pointing it out on the internet.
Mm.
So
Speaking of eating, one other subtle touch that I really enjoyed was that their last meal was the same exact meal that they had on their first meal.
yes, I actually did notice that, and that was really cool.
Yeah, man, it was beautiful. And you don't, I think Frank realized it too. He looks at it, and he looks up and smiles at him, like, man, you remembered after all this time.
Yeah, it was it was truly incredible to watch. What did you think about the scene where Joel and Ellie find him?
So, when they get in there, I am one thinking about how if they're going to show them, and they did a really good job of panning from the room and not showing them. Um, you have the scene where this is another really good video game tie-in. The garage, the truck, it was all set up the same exact way. Now the events that took place to them getting to the truck, that was different, but that's it's a good difference. But I really did enjoy that. I enjoyed it, like I said, him reading the letter, or actually her reading the letter. She got the letter first, and I was laughing at the part where she's like, for Joel or whoever, she's like, I'm guessing I'm whoever. um what else happened on that part, man? I'm so blown away by their story. I almost kind of forget what happens after the fact, but I do remember them coming to the house. I remember Joel reading the note, and then them getting to the truck and putting the music on. She's like, oh, this is better than listening to nothing. She can't really appreciate it because she didn't live in that time, but you could really see Joel just taking it all in.
Well, and I love that the sound on the radio, or maybe they had like a old CD or tape or whatever, of it was the song they played on the piano at the beginning.
Yes, 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 absolutely. No,
Um,
that was good.
but one thing I wanted to touch on though is with the letter, she gets to the end and she doesn't want to read it, and then Joel takes it,
Ah,
and he goes outside, and there's that line in there about, hey, use this to protect Tess,
yeah. And he
and
doesn't say it, but they zoom in on it. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
oh yeah, this fucked him up, man. He was done. uh, and understandably so, because like they had maybe not the exact kind of relationship that Bill and Frank had, but they survived together. They depended on each other every day,
Right.
and for him to lose her on this mission that he doesn't even believe in, yeah, it's understandably really heavy on him.
Yeah. No, you're right, man. And they're doing a really good job of capturing those emotions from Joel, because you also see him going through that same transition in the game as they're going at like the same pacing that they're doing in the show. That he was kind of going through that same. First he loses his daughter, then he times goes on, and he becomes hardened as well. But then he's with Tess, and Tess kind of gives a little bit softer side to him, that you see, instead of him dealing with everybody else. But then what happens in episode one and in the game, that gets him still at that point. Is like, all right, man, I'm really out here by myself. Even though he's with Ellie, they haven't really made that connection yet. So it's just like at this point, she's literally just something I'm transporting uh to. to the group to get them to the lab. Like that's all she means to me right now. She doesn't really mean much.
Right. Um, another little Easter egg from the game too is when they pull off in the truck is exactly like the truck in the game.
Oh, it's amazing, man. The truck was exactly the truck, the garage, everything was set up. The little bench on the side. I mean, everything was the same.
Yeah, they did a stellar job with all of the scenery and everything as usual. Well, man, if you had to give this, and this is tough, man. This is tough. If you had to give this episode a ranking out of 10, what are you gonna give it?
Hmm. I'm leaning towards like a 9.5 out of 10, man.
Yeah, yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm actually right around there. I was actually thinking more maybe like a 9.7. Uh, just like I thought that this was incredible. I could nitpick a few little things if I wanted to, but for
Hmm.
the most part, man, it's so rare that an episode of TV leaves me in the state that this one did.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know?
I mean, I was stuck. It's one of those episodes that after you watch it, you kind of got to reflect, man. You can't even go and, all right, I'm gonna watch something else or I'm gonna play this next. It's like, nah, I need to just kind of sit here with my thoughts real quick. So
Yeah,
I end up just sitting, just sitting there. I watched how they show at the end of the credits, how they kind of explain the episode and kind of some of the tie-ins and stuff. So I watched that, and then even after that, I'm still blown away by everything I just took in. So I'm sitting there probably for like 5 to 10 minutes, blank screen, just thinking about it and reflecting on it.
yeah, I agree. Like I kind of did the same thing. I didn't actually watch the like after the episode stuff. I just like turned it off and I just kind of like sat there for a minute. I felt almost like when I saw like Infinity War in the theater for the first time.
Oh,
That's similar to how I felt. Like I remember going to the gas station right after that, and like the gas station person, they were like, yeah, it's this much, and I was just kind of like spaced, and
dazed out. I know exactly what you mean.
and the guy was like, "You okay?" I was like, "Yeah, sorry, man." I was like, "I just watched Infinity War at the theater." He was like, "What'd you think about it?" I was like, "I don't know, man. I'm shook." I just walked out like I was like I paid for my stuff and was like, "Yeah, man, I don't know." And I just went and got back in my car like I just it was just like I was just in like a haze kind of.
I love content like that, man. I just absolutely love content that really plays on your emotions and your mind state in real life. Because you forget you really do forget that this is entertainment, this is fictional, because they do such a good job of writing these character stories and dialogue that you just really take, you see them as real people. And when
Right.
things happen to them, you empathize, you feel what they're going through, even though it's fictional. Like you going into it, it's fictional, but you don't feel that way as you're experiencing it. You feel like you're experiencing it in real time with them.
Right. And any piece of art that can make me have an emotional response like that, I'm up for it. You know what I mean? Like that is to me such a huge part of like being human.
Hmm.
And I'm here for it. You know what I mean? Like anything, video game, TV, a painting, a podcast, whatever it is. If you can make me feel emotion in any way similar to that episode of television last night, then
Yeah,
that is like what I'm for. You know what I mean?
absolutely. The game that comes to mind when you just said that is Ragnarok.
Yeah.
There were at least 4 or 5 different moments. I think I actually teared up on 2 moments, and then there were a couple that I was really close to it. I'm like, God, this is so good. Oh my gosh, man.
Yeah, I felt that way about the first game too. In like the most recent God of War series.
Yeah.
They just did such a good job with both of those. So that being said, man, so like we talked about episode 3, and if anybody is here that's only watching the TV show, you haven't played the games, you don't want any spoilers, Thanks for joining us. Now is the time to check out. We're gonna talk the games here for a minute. Where do you think they're going next, man? What do you think? What are you thinking for episode 4?
Ah, all right. So they kind of transition into episode 4 at the end of 3. They're driving, so they're trying to he tells her that where his brother is at. Um and he's trying to make his way out to his brother. So that I can't remember exactly when in the game that happens. But that's basically what's about to play into it. I don't know if you watch the scenes from the next episode, but where people might have felt like this episode wasn't as action packed, this next one is going to be almost all action. So that's my prediction. I think it's going to be a lot of action in this one.
I think so too. Like, so in the game right here, I think you face like a ton of the clickers,
Hmm.
whereas I think they're gonna save that for the next episode.
Yeah.
So I think this next one is gonna be more like jump scares, more horror, more action, to kind of, uh, you know, just set itself next to the episode we just saw, kind of contrast itself
I
a little
also
bit.
think we're going to get a new enemy type.
Yeah, you think we're gonna see the bloater?
I don't know if it's going to be the bloater. Well, I think they could tease the bloater. They might that might be a little bit later, but I think they might tease it. You might hear somebody if they come across some, people on their travels in the next episode, somebody mentioning, something far worse than the clickers. I don't even are they even calling them clickers in the show? I know they kind of do that sometimes where they change the names.
I don't know that they've referred to it necessarily as a clicker. I'm not 100% sure.
Okay. So yeah, that could be something that they change slightly as well, as far as the names. But I think we're gonna see something close to that. And I do think that we are going to see the quote unquote bloater in the show. Absolutely.
Yeah, maybe they save it for more towards the end.
Hmm.
Um,
Because I think it's gonna come with some major, like a major scene, maybe like a major death scene or something like that. Uh, just to really drive home the impact of how powerful this thing is.
yeah, I do think it's going to be pretty crazy when we see it in the show.
Yeah, yeah,
Obviously, they're not going to throw the like spores or whatever, um, because they don't
yeah.
have the spores in the show. But
Mhm.
I think they'll keep all the other aspects of them. And if the way the clickers looked in the show are any indication, this thing's going to look incredible.
Oh my god, the clickers look terrifying. And the sound, the movements. Oh man, they nailed it. They absolutely nailed it. I'm terrified.
Right. Agreed.
I'm even more terrified than I was when I was playing it. And I don't know. Do you want to get into a little bit of two before we go?
Yeah, so we just got the idea that like or the confirmation rather that see this is going to get a season 2, and I believe that the first 9 episodes, which is going to be season 1, I do think they're going to adapt most of if not all the first game. So obviously that stands to reason that in season 2 we're either going to get a bunch of stuff between the first game and the second game that we've never seen before, or they're just going to go right into the second game. What's your thoughts on that?
I am extremely nervous about this for multiple reasons. One, I don't know if I like the idea of them doing season one is game one, season two is game two, because there isn't a third game yet. And
Right.
so, unless they're going to push this out some years, kind of like how they do like Westworld and stuff, we, I mean, the show is going to be short lived.
I don't think there's any way we get season 2 next year just because of HBO's production schedule. I honestly think what they'll do is they will do House of the Dragon next year and then Last of Us season 2 the year after that. And they'll kind of go back and forth for a little bit. Who knows if they're going to do a Last of Us 3? Like even if it takes 2 years, right? So let's just say that Last of Us season 2 comes out in 2025.
Hmm.
We're There's no way a Last of Us 3 game is going to be out by 2027. Uh, because they've confirmed that they're not even working on one yet. And you just like a game development cycle right now, it's too long. It's not enough time for them to make a game from scratch. So
Yeah, I have a different thought on that though. I actually do feel I don't think they've begun production on it. I do think that they've green lighted doing it. I think they're throwing the fan base off, and I actually think that they're going to announce that it's in production this year. I think it's going to be later in the year, but I do think that they're going to do that. I That's just me personally. I could be reaching, and it could just be my own excitement as well. Because I do after finishing part two, I'm like that absolutely has to be a third one. But I do think the story can end with the third one. And having said that, if that is what they choose to do, then are we looking at only 3 seasons of the show?
I think so, man. Well, so executive producer, so Neil Druckmann, who he also was the director for the games, he said
Mhm.
originally that the show had no that they had no intention of adapting anything outside the games. But I think seeing episode 3 of this, it's like, well, that's not true. Uh,
Exactly.
so I could completely see them making a season of the show that takes place between the first two games.
I can see that too. Because then we have to get into the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
You,
Uh,
you
I
you
I
bring
do not want I hate Abby tremendously. Um, I just don't see. Whereas I always have thought that the first game would be better as a TV show than a video game. I don't think that the story of the second game is going to be good in any medium, right? I wouldn't want to read a book that ends that way. I wouldn't want to watch a show that ends that way.
yeah.
I just don't. I thought, especially as a video game, that we should have had the choice at the end to kill Abby or not.
I actually felt like we should have had the choice in both.
Right.
I felt like you should have had the choice in the first game as well as the second game.
I agree. Because when you're playing a video game, there's a certain amount of like player agency that is implied. And
Mhm.
when you take that away entirely for a major decision like that, I think that it harms the medium. And that's one of the reasons why I always said, look, this is better as a TV show. But I think season two, man, if they kill Joel in the first episode of season two, I think they are gonna Game of Thrones themselves.
I was gonna say Walking Dead.
that
I
that
think
too,
it's going to be it's going to have a very similar reaction to the Negan Glenn episode, where that episode alone divided the Walking Dead fan base.
right? Yeah.
Um,
Walking Dead
and
actually did it a couple times because
they did.
they had where Rick got quote unquote killed, but he's not really dead, and then they had where Carl got killed.
Yeah, I think so I'll probably say from the Negan episode, let's just say it retained 60% of the show. When Carl died, I think that took like another half of that. So I think it was like 30% of the people who were watching the show from the beginning are no longer are the only people watching it. Because I mean, even I watched it all the way through to the end, and I mean, looking online, I would see rarely anybody talking about the episodes.
Yeah, I got off of that bandwagon in season three, and I'm really glad I did.
I will say, and I'll tie back into The Last of Us too. But I will say, after you get past those things, once they introduce the whispers, the show does get good again. But you have to go through like 2 or 3 seasons of, oh my gosh, I can't wait for the show to be over to get to that point. And unfortunately, a lot of people they just couldn't sit through it. And I don't blame them at all. I really don't. I had been watching the show since it started. I watched the pilot when it aired. So I was so invested. I was like, I have to see it through. It was kind of like the Game of Thrones where a lot of people felt that way about the last season. I'm like, but we invested in so much time. You have to see it through.
Right.
So that's kind of how I felt about it. And with this, see, I understand people's frustration with the story in part two. there were moments that I really enjoyed in part two. Um, but then there's also moments that I didn't enjoy. And I'll be honest, I'm not necessarily mad at the Joel death. I am mad at how rushed it felt.
Right.
Um, it didn't seem unnecessary considering what he had did and once and as you got into the story and understanding Abby's story and the other characters of the game, he kind of did do something selfish that ruined a lot for like a lot of people. So I understand their frustration with them. It just kind of felt cheap though. And if they do that in the show, it is going to ruin it, to be honest. So what I'm hoping, but see, this is why I said it's going to be tough for them to do. If they can change that, it can increase the longevity of the show. But then, at what expense will that be? Because you're going to really divide the fan base because people are like, okay, so now y'all are completely rewriting the game, like the story of the game. So I don't think that's a bad thing.
Right.
I'm liking, like, for instance, this last episode. That story was not the same as it was in the game. They were partners in the game, but that was a completely different outcome.
Right.
And it's better. So
Yeah.
they could do that again with other people's stories. And so can I just can't see them bringing him on to play Joel, this amazing actor, just for him to play in one season. I just can't see it.
Right. And then to come on and get killed off, like I don't see that either. I that's hard for me to fathom. Right.
Right.
It's tough. So maybe they'll do something else. I honestly really would love that if they did. To see them go another direction with it and kind of deviate from that because I just don't see there being any way that they can adapt the second game as closely as they're doing the first game so far and have it go over well. Because the first game is about love and it's about companionship and things like that. But the second game is about hate and revenge.
Yes, and that is another thing I'm concerned about, how much is going to change Ellie's character in the show. Because in the game, you see it, you're playing it, you're experiencing it, but to see that on screen, it's gonna be jarring, man.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see the way they take it. So, uh, I wonder where they're going to go. Like I said, or like you said, really, you're going to bring on Pedro Pascal for 9 episodes and then kill him off. I mean,
I can't see it, man. I
gra-
can't see it.
granted, I would love for him to have more time to be the Mandalorian. Don't get me wrong, but I'm just looking at this from HBO's perspective. So,
Yeah,
but
no, I'm with you on that, man. Well, we'll see, I guess.
yeah, that's it. Well, hey man, thank you so much for joining me on this. As soon as we decided to review these, I was like, man, I got to get Stan on because I know you're a huge fan of these games. So,
Yeah,
uh,
absolutely.
yeah, man, definitely thanks for coming back on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me again, man.
Well, hey, to everybody who stuck with us and is still, still listening here, definitely thanks for listening all the way through. We're gonna be reviewing episode 4 next week. I can't see, wait to see what happens. This show is definitely keeping us on our toes. With that being said, this has been an Evolved Review.